does God is one really mean? Why do people say that God is indescribable and unchangeable? In this video, we will explore what absolute unity truly means and the reasoning behind God's attributes. The term one is derived from the concept of unity. Unity splits into two parts: incidental unity, or what we can call conventional unity, and absolute unity. Let's first discuss incidental, or conventional unity. This unity refers to anything that is a collective or multitude aggregation of parts that we nevertheless ascribe the term one, or unity. So for example, one army is made up of many men, and one man is made up of many parts. An individual, for example, we say is one, but really, there's many parts to the individual. One leader includes many small measures. So this incidental unity is either plural or one, depending on your perspective. But we know that it's not truly one. That's why we call it conventional unity. It's what we use in everyday language. Incidental unity is plurality. It is not unity in a true sense. Finally, we come to absolute unity. Absolute unity can be seen in abstract thought or in actual reality. In abstract thought, absolute unity occurs when we think about the number one. Numbers are abstract, but the number one signifies absolute unity. Now, in reality, absolute unity is what we can ascribe to the Creator. We can best classify absolute unity by what it is not. So we can say that absolute unity is not plurality. We know this because absolute unity is not made up of any parts. And since it's not plural and made up of parts, it cannot be ascribed to any physical or corporeal attributes like size, color, or shape, because these are parts that we use to describe something. To do so would limit its absoluteness, its unity. Also, because it's not plural and it doesn't have any parts, it is not subject to change or variation. It cannot be changed. You can't take anything away from it because it doesn't have any parts to remove. You can't rearrange it because it doesn't have any parts to rearrange. You also can't add to it because that would mean that it wasn't absolutely one in the first place. Think about it like infinity. We know that the first cause is infinite, so we know this applies. Infinity isn't made up of discrete parts. You can't remove anything from it. You can't add anything to it because this would mean that it was finite to begin with. Infinity is all-encompassing. It is indivisible. We can even take this deeper. Change depends on something to change it. And we know that the first cause is independent. It doesn't depend on anything. And even further, when something changes, there is a before the change state and an after the change state. We can think of this like an iceberg melting. We have an iceberg before the change, it melts, and then it's a puddle of water after the change. So there are two states of that substance of water. This is plurality, and absolute unity cannot have plurality. So now we can say that it does not move or waver, because movement implies change. When you move, you are in one state, and then you move to another state. This is a duality of states, and absolute unity doesn't contain duality. Similarly, it cannot be created or destroyed, because this would imply change, and even from this we can derive the fact that absolute unity does not have a beginning, no creation, and does not have an end, no destruction. Absolute unity is also not associated with anything. Why? Because association requires connection, and connection implies dependence. Think about it like this. If a parent is associated with a child, then the child depends on the parent for care, and the parent depends on the child for their role as a parent. Hopefully that makes sense. And of course we know that absolute unity does not depend on anything, so it cannot then be associated with anything. Absolute oneness is entirely independent. It doesn't rely on anything. That's what makes it truly beyond comparison, association, or resemblance. But let's dig into resemblance further. Absolute unity does not resemble anything. Think about it. Everything that we compare has parts. Absolute unity does not have any parts. We can't compare absolute unity to anything that we know because everything has parts. Remember what we said 2 videos ago. The Creator must transcend incidental properties like size, color, shape. These incidental properties are what we use to compare different things. So when we say that a chair resembles another chair, they may be alike in their size or their design, but we are comparing parts of the chair. And even if we did try to compare absolute unity, we would be dividing it into two parts, itself and the shared aspect that it shares with another thing that we're comparing. And this goes against its indivisible nature. Now, you may be wondering, why isn't unity itself an incidental property? You, Justin, said that you can't ascribe any characteristics to the Creator. Now, you're right, we can't. When we say that God is one, we really just mean that God is not plural. He doesn't contain any multitudity. Indeed, the Creator is ultimately indescribable. So in all, we know the following. God is not plural. He is not made up of parts. He cannot be described as having any corporeal attributes or physical attributes, incidental properties. He is not susceptible to change or variation, cannot be changed. He does not move or waver. He does not have a beginning or end. God cannot be associated with anything, nor does he resemble anything. This is what we know about God using sheer logic. Please let me know in the comments if you find any contradictions or inconsistencies, or if you think that this is probably true. Remember, we can really only know God by knowing what he is not and by perceiving his influence on the world. Thankfully, we can know more through the Torah. Subscribe to stay tuned, because next week we will seek to establish the accuracy of the event on Mount Sinai. Hopefully you guys understand what it means when we say God is one. Thank you all for watching.